Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 116, and we're going to revisit our Fundamentals series. The Fundamentals series is where we kind of take a look at core concepts of Infinity or kind of the bare bones basics to kind of help introduce people to the game or certain aspects of the game and things like that. And for this episode, we're going to be talking about tags, the tactical armor gear, the sweet big robots that we love so much in Infinity. And we're going to go over how you might use those. And while this is primarily geared towards newer players, even more experienced players may have something that they can pick up here or there that might be of benefit. But before we get started, we do want to say thanks to Mo Games, sponsor of Metachemistry. You can find Mythic's online emporium over at mo-games.com. And as part of Mo's sponsorship, all of our paid patrons of any tier get a 10% discount code to that store. And if you're part of our free Discord, you can win a raffle for a $40 coupon code each month. So in order to enter that, you just be a part of our Discord, and you need to have a United States shipping address for Mo to send to. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. And so for this episode, it is Ian and me. And Ian, how have things been? I know that lately it's been kind of hard to find time to work on your gaming endeavors, but have you been able to kind of squeeze some in between all of the moves and other life obligations?
A little bit. Trying to remember if the last local tournament was before the last episode recorded or after it. But either way, we had a little local tournament. I think we had about 12 people. And
Nice.
yeah, it was fun. Came in like right in the middle of the pack on that one.
Oh, yeah. That was, yeah, we did talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it was fun. A lot of mirror matches. We had a lot of JSA Shin and Butai going on in the community, so that was fun. Outside of that, we've been continuing our explorations and endeavors with Warcrow, and that's just been an absolute blast of a game. For me, it's a lot of like when I first started Infinity, and it was like everything was new and did new things and was kind of like, ooh, how does this work? There's a lot of that flavor to it right now, especially as like the range is growing and you get the rules drops for each model as the models are released. So it's been very entertaining. There's a lot of I don't know if this is good or not, so I'm just going to throw it on the table and see
what happens.
As well as the fact of how characters in Warcrow can join units, not willy-nilly, but there's a lot of times where like, you know, they can join specific units or a specific type of unit or things like that. And they give bonuses to those units of various types. And it's been a lot of fun going, well, what if I put this character with this unit and see how that works?
Right.
So there's been a lot of experimentation potential and, you know, kind of figuring out what things do. And it's early enough in the life cycle that there really isn't a meta for it yet. It's just free for all and kind of fun for that right now.
Yeah, I know, especially locally. Like, I've been able to also get a couple games of Warcrow in, running through with my Scions, playing. I don't think I've played any Northern Tribes with them yet, but played against Hegemony and Xenon.
Make this happen.
All right. We'll do it. But yeah, so I've been getting a little bit of Warcrow in, so that's been pretty interesting. And yeah, it's kind of cool because you're just being a new game, it's kind of neat to learn the new things that come up and like, oh, that unit does that. That would have been important for me to think about. But yeah, otherwise, mostly I've been helping onboard some players lately. So I've had a couple new people in the community. So hopefully they become kind of a recurring member for that. So that's been fun to run some demos and some smaller games and just play and meet new people, which has been great. But yeah, so overall pretty good. Still bouncing around as I do because, what is preparation? Not going to bother with that. So, as far as our main topic for tonight, tags. I think it's safe to say that tags are some of the most eye-catching models in most factions, that they tend to be kind of the centerpiece units. They usually, take up a notable portion of a list, and they're just really cool. So, Ian, do you want to kind of break down what are we talking about as far as tags go? What are some of the defining characteristics that we should be keeping in mind when we're talking about tags?
So tags are currently exclusively size 6 or size 7, with the exception of one tag that is size 8, the only model in the game that is size 8 in the Magriba Guard. But what they do is, so they're big. They generally have a 6-4 move profile. There's a little wiggle on that, but most tags have a 6-4 move. They generally tend to have a decent ballistic skill, 13 or higher. 14 is kind of the sweet spot for most tags, unless you're Pano, in which case they're all 15. And, Fizz is pretty high because they're the big tough robot. And armor tends to be high, generally between 6 and 8 on the armor. BTS usually is 6 to 9, depending on how beefy the tag is. And I think there's one tag that's armor 5, or maybe
The geckos might still be armor 5. No, they got bumped up to 6.
okay. And the overdrawns.
The Zeodrons, the jumping ones. They're,
Yeah.
I think, well, no, they might have gone to 6 also.
Yeah, so Zeodrons are armor 5, so they're kind of the outlier there. Yotam's armor 10, that's the outlier on the other end. But most of them are going to be right in that spot of like 7 or 8. 6 is kind of the lower end. And outside of that, they all have, for the most part, at least 3 points of structure. And then they also generally have things like, I'm a tag, so all my weapons shoot slightly bigger bullets. So you get a damage boost on them, which will be a -1 on the opponent's saving roll. They all have some restrictions, like they can't go prone and they can't cautious move. And then from there, they just kind of generally go out all over the place and have a lot of variety in them, like most other unit types do.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, tags, broad strokes, kind of fall into two general categories, which are pretty commonly referred to as light tags and main battle tags. And so light tags are typically going to be your silhouette 6 variants, and they're going to be often, but not always, on the little bit lower end of that stat range across the board, particularly in the defenses department with their armor and PTS.
Mm-hmm.
And often with, the lower fizz, possibly lower ballistic skill, though that's not always the case, of course. And they tend to be cheaper and generally are more lightly armed than their main battle tag brothers. The main battle tags, those are going to be the top end tags. These are going to be the typically in the ballpark of 70 plus points. They're going to have their floor is usually ballistic skill 14. Their armor is usually 8. But again, some room for exceptions there. And they're typically going to be size 7, though we have seen some that are kind of in between. Like, I feel like the Long Wang is right in between this, between a light
Yeah.
tag and a main battle tag. Like, it's much closer to a main battle tag in terms of overall stats than a light tag. including the cost. And so, another thing to keep in mind with tags that's kind of unique to them is that they can be possessed. That's a status effect you can only put onto tags. Now, there are a couple tags that are immune to possession, notably the Avatar in Combined Army and Maximus in Aleph/Pano. But enemy hackers can potentially take your tag and turn it around on you and start attacking your own stuff, which is one of my favorite ways to play tags, is to use other people's tags.
Yeah,
But, you know, if I can't have one, might
I'll
as well
take
do it
yours.
that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so typically, most of these tags, light tags, will often have weapons that are kind of mid range brawler weapons. Things like some variety of marksman rifle or Spitfire, or um, sometimes they'll also have HMGs and things like that. Those are common weapons for them. And again, all of these are very broad, and there are going to be exceptions to the
Mhm.
majority of things that we say here.
Yeah.
These aren't meant to cover every profile exactly,
Yeah.
but
Often they even have as basic as a combi rifle with some damage boosts or some special ammo.
sure. And the main battle tags, those are typically going to carry the big guns. Those are going to be things like the bottom end is usually like APHMGs, but a lot of times they're multi heavy machine guns or hyper rapid magnetic cannons or HRMCs. That's usually the type of armament that you're going to see on main battle tags. And so if we kind of look at the strengths of tags overall, the obvious things that kind of jump out is that these tend to be among the more durable units in the game. They can absorb the highest number of wounds, they have the best armor, and they generally have good stats so that they're winning more face-to-face rolls, again, broad strokes, compared to other units. But this is Infinity, and there are no invincible units. And so you still have to be careful with these, even though they are the most durable things you can bring. As we'll talk about later, there are still ways to deal with them pretty handily. And as far as general weaknesses of tags, most of them are going to dislike electromagnetic ammunition because that will isolate and immobilize them. There are some Warhorse tags, notably the Murat tags, though, which will prevent the isolation portion of it, but EM is a very big threat, as well as hacking. Because tag willpower, generally speaking, is pretty average. This is not the attribute that tends to be higher than other counterparts. This is generally kind of whatever the average of your army, they're usually right around that. So they're a little bit more vulnerable to hacking. And then, of course, you know, armor piercing ammunition or K1 ammunition
Or
is
monofilament.
one of the best. Yeah, monofilament, real good there. Because if you can, basically, these are all tools that kind of help mitigate those defensive stats. Because you can cut through their armor partially or entirely. Monofilament on top of that, like Ian says, will just kill them outright if they fail a save. And again, they don't get to add their armor. So these are the dream of a monofilament martial artist, is to run into a tag and destroy one of those.
Yeah.
But Ian, what about you? What are some other big kind of strengths and weaknesses that you want to point out so that people kind of have an idea of what we're looking at?
So because of their size, they tend to be a little more difficult to maneuver on the board without taking arrows, because it's a big model, big silhouette. So You have to really kind of plan your deployment and your route of advance to try to make it so that you can slice the pie favorably and take the fights that you want to take. So that can be a big weakness of tags, that they can just kind of get caught out and take multiple AROs just based on their size next to the relative terrain that they're next to. So
Yeah.
that can be fun. And then
And that
outside,
actually brings up a good strength too,
yeah,
is that because they have a high silhouette, they can walk over more terrain. And
yep,
especially when you're looking at the S7 tags, like S7 tags can just step up on top of a lot of single story structures for a lot
hmm
of terrain that at least I see on many tables. So yeah, that kind of cuts both ways.
yeah. Um, Outside of that, like because they are not able to cautious move,
Hmm.
that means that even if they can't see you, that sometimes you can't avoid certain fights if you need to move across an area because you can't do the cautious move. You can't go
Hmm.
prone, so that's another way that you can't avoid some of those fights.
Yep, you shoot your
So,
way out. That's what you
yep.
do.
Uh, Another weakness of tags, and this is it's a weakness, but it's necessary. So in general, tags have a high fizz, but they don't dodge on their full fizz. They
Mhm.
generally have a set fizz value that they dodge on. It's usually in the realm of 10 to 12 instead
Yep.
of the 14, 15, up to 18 that some tags are for their fizz. So it'll be a set value. And that kind of brings them in line with most other troopers so that you're not getting these super powerful dodges without weird bonuses that certain models have. But
Hmm.
it also means that they are a little more vulnerable than they feel like they should be against adhesive.
Sure,
Because
para ammo. Yeah.
yep, hair ammo. So the initial hit goes off their full fizz, but if they fail it and they're immobilized, the way they get out of it is by dodging. Well, now you're doing the dodge on, say, your fizz of your dodge value of 12, which is now a 6.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that's something that, they feel like they're more vulnerable to that than they should be, but it's a good game balance factor, because
Yeah.
para is one of the ways to try to take a tag out of the fight when you can't actually damage it.
Yeah. Learn that from Ghost in the Shell.
Yep.
Spider tank.
Uh, yeah. And then along with that, uh, that lower fizz, you generally have a second attribute value related to being fixed by gizmo kits. You can still walk an engineer up to them and do your engineer's full whip value to fix a tag. But if you're going to use the gizmo kit, because that rolls off of the target's fizz, they generally have a set value for the gizmo kit, which is usually around 11. So that you're not just going, yep, I fixed my tag on an 18 because I'm a Yodam.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So definitely good things to keep in mind. Yeah. That tags, they typically are going to have to take those gunfights. They're not really going to skirt around arrows nearly as well. Again, some tags are much better at this, particularly those that have marker states. But yeah, they're going to have to take those fights, and while they have the attribute line to win a lot of those fights, there are things that they are going to struggle with. So typically one of those things is going to be mimetism,
Mhm.
which will kind of even those things out. So there are Uh, the main one that you can't do that to is the Marut, who has a multispectral visor level 2 and just doesn't care about mimetism. But most tags are not like that. They don't have visors. In fact, I don't recall any MSV1 tags off the top of my head.
I don't either. Seems like a thing that isn't a thing.
Right? So that's one thing that can also be a little bit difficult, especially if it is a unit that has some sort of good anti tank weapon. Like if you have potentially a multi sniper rifle or maybe a missile launcher or something like that on a MIM6 unit, that's something that kind of strips away a good portion of the tag's advantage.
The Noctifer play, if you will.
Right. Yep. But tags also tend to, because of the weaponry that they have, most tags are going to be firing burst 4 weapons. Not exclusively, but the majority of them will have a burst 4 weapon. And
Hmm.
so, between their higher ballistic skill and the weight of dice and their general defensive stat line, they're really good at taking firefights. So, while that is their primary option of getting out of sticky situations, they're pretty good at it more often than not.
Yes, they are. But the big thing with them is because it's still Infinity, they're still vulnerable.
Hmm.
It's they feel like you should be able to use them like a sledgehammer, but really they tend to work best when they're used as a rather large scalpel.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that with that, I think we can kind of go into some of the ways that you might use these. Now that we have a little bit of a foundation in terms of general strengths and weaknesses. Is that especially main battle tags generally don't want to advance very much. They want to move to a position where they can see an enemy at medium long range and destroy it, and then move to see an enemy at medium long range and destroy it, and so on. So you typically don't want to advance main battle tags very much. You just want to kind of find those targets unless you are firing kind of parallel to your deployment zone. If you're able to advance further up the board and start firing across the table instead of down along the table, and you can find some good fire lanes that way, that's a good or a good way to use those main battle tags because they have really big guns. They're always, they're essentially always long range, and you kind of want to keep them at arm's distance. Like these are more akin to artillery pieces. And
Hmm.
so you want to make sure that you save a couple orders so that you can pull them back into a defensive position where they can still leverage their range against enemy troopers. Because a tag that makes its way up into the midfield with primarily long range guns and maybe something like heavy pistols or a flamethrower or something as point defense is going to get easily overwhelmed,
Hmm.
particularly by something like a warband troop who has smoke and a good CC, and maybe they don't always have enough CC to where they'll reliably kill a tag, but the tag's not going to get away without help.
Yeah, and
By
most
and large,
tags
there are.
do have some form of template weapon, but that only gets you so far.
Mhm. Yeah, there are a few tags that are good in CC. Things like both the JSA tags, the
Yep.
Oyoroi and the Mechazoid, are very good in CC. Then there are things like the Maximus or the Seraph that
And
are also
Agamemnon.
pretty good in CC. Yeah, Agamemnon's not bad in CC. The Gator is pretty
Eh,
decent.
it's all right.
Yeah, it's fine. It's like deterrent CC.
Yeah.
Even the Agamemnon, I wouldn't say that the goal would be to charge it in CC, but that's a good way to tie up the majority of tags. Is you can run into CC with them, and that's another reason why you don't want to leave them in the midfield. Is because it's easier for those sorts of troops to sneak up on you and jump in CC and tie up your tag. And even if they don't kill it, just you having to find a way to get them out of CC to use your expensive trooper again is just effort that you don't want to have to deal with. So, as far as Lighter tags, these tend to be brawlers. So most light tags, you do kind of want to advance a little bit, but they'll typically want some support.
Mhm.
And I think that it's reasonable to have lighter tags, roughly in the midfield. I wouldn't generally go significantly past the halfway line unless you find a good spot where, again, you can kind of shoot across the table or something like that. But they can kind of hold a spot and, they're reasonable suppression fire targets. And if you have some units around that can protect them, that can go a long way. And they generally have kind of good out to 24-inch range weapons, though a lot of size 6 units will have an option to get something like a heavy machine gun. Some of them will have special ammo, heavy machine guns, but that's going to be hit or miss.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of Spitfire, AP Spitfire, multi marksman rifles, or similar that you'll see in a lot of light tags. And you get those at a nice discount. Most light tags are going to be closer to the mid 50s to mid 60s, something like that for a lot of them. Again, a couple exceptions, but that's where a lot of those live. But yeah, Ian, what about you? What are some ways that you like to use tags in kind of broad strokes, whether those be light tags or main battle tags or both?
I like to use them as part of a wider battle plan where they have a role, and that role is to take firefights where they can take a hit and understand that everything it can die and everything can be is expendable in the right circumstances. But if I can get the tag to eliminate some pieces that are preventing, say, my fire team from moving up on an objective, where the risk of the fire team losing guys is significantly higher than the tag being
Hmm.
taken off the board, the tag is very likely a good way to open up that lane of advance by taking out whatever is holding up your fire team. Uh, it's a tool in your arsenal. It's not the only tool that you have.
Yeah,
So, relying building lists and relying on the tag to kind of do everything to be the be all end all of the list, the focus of the list, generally won't perform very well. Uh, Balance in all things, as it
mhm,
were,
sure.
but they're definitely a lot of fun. And despite what I just said, if you're going to take a tag, you do have to kind of build for it. And what I mean by that is taking a tag on its own is a risky proposition because there's plenty of ways for them to get taken out. There's plenty of ways for them to be hacked and turned against you. There's a lot of things that make them vulnerable that you can mitigate in the list building step by taking things to support your tag, because an unsupported tag is usually going to be a dead tag. So
Hmm.
it's a thing where I'm taking a tag, so maybe I should take an engineer in order to fix that tag. Maybe I should take some hackers and repeaters so that I can build a defensive network around the tag to make it harder for my opponent to get a hacker up and do something to my tag. Maybe I should take an Evo hacker to put a firewall on the tag to make it harder to be hacked. Things like
Sure.
that. Even as simple as maybe I should take a cheap warband unit whose job is to kind of screen the route of advance for the tag. That his job is to hang out near the tag and kind of prevent the opponent from being able to easily move their own warband or skirmisher units up to take action against it. You know, things like that. Is there one solution? No. It's going to be army dependent, mission dependent, a lot of those factors, but
Hmm.
have an idea of what you want your tag to accomplish, what it's there for, and build to support that, but understand that it's one tool that you have, not the only tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are definitely some centerpiece tags. Like
Yes.
some of the tags that are main battle tags that you're now looking at the, 80, 90 plus range. Things like the Cutter, the Avatar, the Marut. Those are things where they're taking up so much of your list. It's very important that you have support. Like those are tags where I don't find myself ever wanting to bring them without engineer support, for instance. You need to be able to keep those things running, both in terms of being able to repair their damage and getting rid of status effects that get applied to them. Another way that you can help support your tags is by running killer hackers. Specifically, if you have either a hidden deployment skirmisher, or maybe you have a combat jump or parachutist killer hacker, things that you can kind of move up and just kill an enemy hacker or two that might be threatening your tag otherwise, instead of having to fight through repeaters or having to worry about placement as much in terms of, oh, well, where can they project their hacking area around me? A lot of times, you probably, unless you're playing against me, you're probably not running against more than two hackers against a lot of factions.
That's fair.
So, you can get, if you can drop a killer hacker or, spend two or three orders on a hidden deployment piece, scooting up the field, and then go Trinity a hacker on your turn. Now, it doesn't matter how many repeaters your opponent has. You can just walk around with impunity with your tag, and
Yep.
everything's fine again. So, and again, all of these are different potential answers to potential problems you might run into with your tag. So some of these will help and some of these won't, depending on what your opponents are playing and how much of what they happen to bring. But ways to fix your tag, ways to buff your tag in the case of fairy dust, ways to protect it from enemy hackers, those are all good things to have. Like we had talked about with EM or para ammo, engineers will fix those. If they take damage, engineers will take care of that. So if you want to run a tag, I would generally recommend having an engineer. Some of the light tags are cheap enough where it's not, it doesn't feel like it's too terrible. But I feel like if it's not a pressure on the list, it's definitely worth having at least an engineer.
Yeah. I find myself increasingly drawn to taking some of the tag pilots with the tag com rule that's new to this edition. Uh,
For sure.
they're generally very cheap, like 10-ish points, give or take a little bit. And they're all specialists as far as I know, and they all kind of do their own thing. But the big thing that they do is just by being in the list, they will grant all of your tags +3 to their fizz to their dodge. So that mitigates some of the issues with dodging or getting out of para, ammo immobilized, things like that. And they give you an additional +1 fizz on gizmo kit rolls to fix them. So for a modest investment of around 10 points, it potentially increases the survivability of your tag by a fair amount.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and being able to take just one of these tag comms and it apply to any tag in the combat group is really helpful, especially because these are prices where these are right around where your most basic light infantry troops are going to sit anyway. So, and if you're in many sectorals, not all of them, but many sectorals, these are actually able to join fire teams with your basic troopers
Yeah.
pretty commonly. So yeah, tag pilots and the tagcom skill are really useful ways to kind of help buff up your tags. That said, I do really wish they do some more and interesting things with tagcom.
Yeah, I wish they would do some individual ones because, like, JSA has two different TAGCOM pilots, for example. They have the
Hmm.
Oyodai pilot and they have the Mechazoid pilot. And the pilot profiles are very different, but they give the exact same bonuses to the tags. There's a lot of potential design space for, like, oh, this one gives you slightly better CC, or this one gives you a boost to, whatever stat. Like, there's some design space potential for that, which I think would be cool to explore. But I also understand keeping it consistent across the board as well.
Yeah, and I know we kind of talked about tagcom leading up to N5 or a little, or just after launch when we were talking about initial rules changes and the like. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen tagcom be a little bit more specific. But yeah, still one of those things that can help your tags out quite a bit because that makes them easier to repair, makes them a
Mhm.
little bit more survivable. It makes it so that you're just a little bit more resilient against things like para ammo uh, or mines. Like, particularly, there are monofilament mines that you would be real sad about stepping over with a tag.
Yep.
And while it probably doesn't make it feel much better, at least you're negating the penalty from the mine with a
Yeah,
tag pilot out.
dodging on your 12 instead of a 9.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So tag pilots also a good unit to have around. And it's again a pretty cheap order, all things considered. Like typically what your line troops are. So, as far as other tactics or interesting uses for tags, what kind of jumps out to you? I know we've talked about them being like fire support pieces, and that's kind of the focus of what many tags are going to be. They're kind of fire superiority pieces. But
Mhm.
do you have some other ways that you like to use tags or other roles that they are fun for you in?
It depends on the tag's loadout and its skill set, but I particularly enjoy the CC oriented tags because they tend to just be absolutely monstrous,
Mm-hmm.
and which is hilarious. Um, so a CC oriented tag is generally one with a CC value of at least 20 that has at least some level of either natural born warrior or martial arts or something that gives it a little bit of a boost in close combat. Also, giving it a generally a pretty good CC weapon with a decent PS value. So a CC tag is like they're really good if your opponent doesn't have their own model with a good CC to kind of get in there and contest it. They actually are one that if you can find a good route of advance and just get in close and just make them a problem. Understand that you're likely sacrificing it at some point, but it becomes a piece that if you park it close to or in your opponent's deployment zone, that they have to deal with it because it's going to be getting arrows or what have you against whatever they do, and it's without dedicating some orders to taking it out, it's not going to go away very quickly.
Sure.
So
Yeah, they tend to be pretty sticky.
yeah, so I really like the CC oriented tags. Outside of that, there are a few specialist kind of tags out there that I also enjoy. There is specifically the hacker tag. There's really only
Stigmata from
one,
Bakunin.
but
Yep.
the stigmata from Bakunin is very unique because it's the tag that doesn't do what any of the other tags do. Like you don't really play
True.
it like you play any other tag. Like you can still do some firefights with it if you really pick your fights because it's got like a heavy rocket launcher with some extra burst. But
Hmm.
it's not like going to really stand up in a face to face with a lot of stuff that's really beefy. But its advantages is that the tag itself is the specialist. So
Right.
generally with tags, they can drop a bot to have a specialist to do objectives, but the tag itself isn't a specialist. So you got to kind of plan some stuff around how you're going to move and this and the other versus the Stigmata, where it itself can just go rock up and do objectives because it is a specialist. Um, it does have its own downside in that it's the only tag that you can killer hack because it's a hacker.
Sure. Sure.
And that's kind of interesting. But it's a really cool model that's unique in the design space of Infinity. So I really like that one. And then there's the kind of the camo slash hidden deployment tags. These ones are a lot of fun. The two big ones, of course, are the Cutter and the Sphinx, and they are your opponent generally knows that that one of them is going to be on the board based on the fact that there's a huge chunk of points that are missing.
Right. Yeah, because these are
But it's
tags
a
that are pushing 100 points.
yeah, but it's where are they? And yeah, they reveal their mimetism -6, surprise attack. They're very gross, very mean. The Cutter in this is a main battle tag, so it comes out and just destroys things with range. Does have a weakness though, in that it does not have a template or any short range weapon to back it
Yep.
up. But the Cutter, or sorry, the Sphinx is kind of almost the opposite. It's a close range monster because it has what a Spitfire and heavy flamethrowers, and it's like fast. It's like 6'6" with climbing plus, so it's just kind
Yep.
of getting all over the board, coming at people, and it is just kind of a bit of a beefy nightmare in that regard. But
Absolutely.
it's not super great in CC. So like it's a 20, but it doesn't really have any skills outside of it being a 20. So that's a way to
Right.
kind of stop that. Is it's on the lower end of armor of 6 and BTS of 6. But those are the kind of the big ones there for that. And then the kind of the final category of weird tags is going to be the combat jump tags, which is the
The
Cascuda.
one. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. The Cascuda. And it is only in Combined Army, in generally in Onyx, and
And
it
vanilla.
in vanilla. But yeah, but it jumps in and hits the ground and it comes up with a multi rifle and a chain rifle. So this thing is just kind of starting right in your deployment zone and messing up your dudes. So it's fantastic for that. Relatively inexpensive at like 64 points. So you will see them kind of often if you're playing against vanilla or Onyx for Combined Army. And so their weapons aren't fantastic because it's going to have some little bit of a downside, but the weapons are very keyed to what it does as far as being right there, close ranged, and jumping in.
Sure.
So,
Though the Cascada does have SR -2 on its BS attacks. So that
yeah,
multi rifle's hitting at PS5, and the
that
chain
is true.
rifle is hitting at PS5. So they're actually pretty hard. And plus
Yeah,
1 burst on all its attacks. So it's 4 multi rifle shots, 2 chain
yes.
rifle shots. So like it can really eat things up in close
Mhm.
range.
Yep. And then there's a decent amount of highly mobile tags as far as things with like climbing plus or super jump for
Hmm.
tags. Like the Seraph and the Guija have super jump,
Yep.
and the Mechazoid and some others have climbing plus. So
And the tick
there's
belong. Hmm.
yep, tick belong. So there's a lot of movement potential with them. Certain models in order to get weird routes of advance or weird angles as they advance on the board. So, like I said, there's a lot of potential, but the big thing with all of these is expect to lose them if you don't support them, and expect to lose them if you leave them in a poor position. It's really easy to get excited that your tag is killing
Mm-hmm.
dudes and just keep spending orders on it when really, if that's going well, it's oftentimes, and I'm going to say usually, the better option to um, reserve 2 orders at the end of your turn to move the tag back into a defensible position and put it in suppression fire to prepare for your opponent's turn, because you run out of orders and they're just sitting more, halfway or more up the board with nothing really kind of watching them on from your side. That's a tempting and often easy target for your opponent to take out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good thing to keep in mind, kind of in general, is saving a few orders to kind of set yourself up. I would say at least two, like Ian said, but you might even want another one or two, depending on where you can actually get and where your other pieces are, particularly if you are going to set them up in suppressive fire as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that also means that because these tend to be among the more expensive pieces you can take, they're also, and just how dangerous they can be, they're also going to be a priority target for your opponent. And that is sort of a double edged sword. Because on the one hand, that means that your opponent's going to be dedicating their most apt resources to destroy that tag. But that also means that there are instances where you can sort of direct the flow of battle a little bit and use them either as bait if your opponent is really keen to take them out, or if they're playing very conservatively and are kind of scared of your tag, you can use those to shut off routes of advance. Because tags
Mm-hmm.
often, especially tags that have mimetism or most any main battle tag, are pretty reasonable ARO pieces, depending on what your opponent has. Like if you see some, big AP weapon that's high burst on your opponent's side, or they have their own tag, for instance, okay, maybe your tag is not a great ARO against that. Typically, the active tag will usually win those fights.
Mm-hmm.
But against a lot of other pieces that aren't specifically geared to dealing with tags, because of how durable they are, you know that they can be a reliable roadblock. And if you're going to use a tag in a defensive manner like that, make sure that you have them in a spot where they can guts out of line of fire.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can absorb several orders and your opponent only puts a wound or 2 wounds on your tag, you then duck out of the way behind a building where your opponent's not likely to be able to get them, and then you can start repairing it on your turn or otherwise still have it available for that counterpunch. So
Plus,
don't
nothing,
underestimate tags. Hmm?
nothing likes taking a explosive round from a multi HMG.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. Unless you're immunity arm, in
Yeah,
which case you're only a little sad about it, but you're still kind of
yeah,
sad.
because it's still generally going to be PS4.
Right, exactly.
Oof.
So I think one thing that might be fun to kind of round things out is if we do. Sometimes when we talk about unit types, we like to talk about some of our favorites. So, Ian, you want to start us off, and we'll kind of. Mine are never in any particular order because I'm wildly indecisive. But
Mhm.
what are some, say, your top three kind of favorite tags and what you like about them?
Well, I've been having a ridiculous amount of fun with the Mechazoid. It is a size 6 tag, but it is a CC monster. It is just so much fun to run around the board. It's fast. It's 6'4". It's a tag,
Mm-hmm.
but it's CC 23 with martial arts 2. Uh, so it's jumping up, hitting on 26 against something that doesn't have martial arts itself. It's
Yep.
got a explosive close combat weapon at PS4, so it's a ton of fun getting in there for that. It's got climbing plus, and it's one of, I think, only the 2 JSA tags here in the game that have stealth. So it's actually got some sneaky ability on it. So
Yeah,
that's
stealth is very
awesome.
rare on tags.
Yep.
And really powerful.
Yep. And then when it has, so it dodges on an 11, but if you have the tag pilot, this thing dodges on a 14.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually got a decent amount of dodge, which it also dodges an extra 3 inches. So it's got a 5-inch dodge. The thing, like, it is just jumping around, doing all kinds of stuff. And hilariously enough, one of the coolest aspects of it is it's a tag with combat instinct. So it has stealth. It doesn't care about your stealth. And by the way, your surprise attack is ineffective. It just hits you back at full ballistic skill.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that
Not
one
nothing for
is,
sure.
I've been having a ton of fun with the Mechazoid. Plus, the model is really good. And I just got to say it because I got to bring it up as often as possible. It's the only model with a multi Spitfire.
Neat.
What about you? What's your one of your favorites?
There end up being a lot of tags that I really like. But one that just, I always feel like there's something else that I notice about him that is like, oh yeah, that too. That's really cool. And it's Maximus.
Yeah.
Maximus is immune to possession, which is great. Just one thing you don't have to worry about. Um, He has immunity armor, which means most weaponry that's good against tags is much less effective against Maximus. And he's good in close combat. Like, not wildly good, but quite good. He's CC 23 with CC attack -6 and has Natural Born Warrior himself. So he's always fighting on that 24. And if the opponent doesn't have Natural Born Warrior, then they take some pretty hefty penalties in return. And he's a APDA close combat weapon, which is no joke.
Yeah.
And the trade off for Max is that while he's really tanky, he's arm 6, BTS 6, but with immunity arm, that goes a long way. He does. EM is extra worrisome for Maximus because it's just one of those things where that's something that gets through all of his good defensive tech. And he doesn't have good armor piercing himself. So he has a +2 burst Thunderbolt, and then with his SR -1, effectively it makes him, a regular heavy machine gun is generally what it about boils down to. And an EM carbine. And yeah, while he doesn't have a peripheral ancillary to jump out, he does have the transmutation escape system. So when he suffers 3 wounds, he drops in a clip zone, becomes a size 2 operator, and then is a specialist at that point. Not something you can plan for very well, which is kind of perhaps a downside compared to most other tags, but yeah, Maximus just kind of keeps showing up with interesting things that he can do that are easy to pass over in some ways. Like, oh, he doesn't have a dodge penalty or gizmo kit penalty. It's just his flat 13 fizz, which 13 fizz is not very impressive for a tag, but it is impressive for tags, dodge, and gizmo kit values.
So next up in my list is the Raicho for the Morats.
Yeah.
So in addition to just being an awesome model, like, it's really, really cool. Um, as a tag, like, just rules wise, it's awesome. So this is a main battle tag. It's that size 7 armor 8 BTS 6. It's BS 14, so it's just ticking all the boxes as far as like kind of baseline middle of the road for a main battle tag. Where it becomes super cool is that this tag just doesn't care about what you throw at it. It has ECM hacker, so it's harder to hack right off the bat. That's
Hmm.
ECM. That stacks with firewall from, say, fairy dust. So
Yeah.
you can make this thing really hard to hack. It has combat instinct, so it doesn't care about surprise attack and it ignores stealth. It's immune to crits, which is, again, 5% of the time, but it's always awesome when it comes up and you're like, no, I'm not taking that extra save.
Yep.
And it's got Warhorse because it's a Morat and all that, and it's religious because it's a Morat. Okay. And it's got some cool profiles with, like, NCO, and they all have multi HMG and things, and kind of a variety of other weapons. Um, One profile in particular is what makes this tag so awesome, and it's the most expensive one, but it's only 81 points. But in addition to the multi HMG, it has a +1 burst heavy shotgun, which, let's be clear, that's on BS14, so it's hitting on 20s. It's your opponent roll higher than you. No, it's
Yeah, as
hitting.
long as you jump out of get them out of cover or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's gross. But the key piece on this is that it has a shock mine dispenser. So you use that to speculatively fire some shock mines near something you want to attack, and then you step out, forcing them to make the decision of shooting at you and eating the mine, doing nothing and eating your HMG, or dodging and hopefully avoiding both. It makes it so much easier to mitigate what your opponent's going to do by removing generally the risk factor to the tag if they want to save their model, because then they have to dodge or they're getting hit with something.
Yep. Absolutely.
And the Magariba Guard can also do this, and that has baggage, so it can reload itself. So that's probably better at it. But the Raicho, for the other things it does, kind of just takes the edge for me.
Yeah, and a quick note on Warhorse. Being immune to isolation is really, really good for a tag because that's one of the
Mm,
main ways to stop a tag from doing something is to hack them with Oblivion, and then they can't receive orders anymore. But
yeah.
they don't care about that. And it also helps that they ignore the BS attack -X that come up from a handful of units, but they tend to be
Oh.
the better gunfighters where they're available, and Righteous don't care about that either.
Well, and even on EM, that's just a reset at -3 to get out of it instead of at a -12.
Yeah, yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it makes them much more resilient against the general tag counters.
Yeah.
But yeah, funny story. The Magariba Guard, another tag that I really enjoy. As mentioned kind of near the top of the episode, the Magariba Guard is the only Silhouette 8 tag in the game. It's a huge spider tank, which is great. It's a really sweet model, but it has a lot of similar benefits that the Raicho has. Not all of them, which is why it's cheaper, but it has 360 visor, which is unique to the Magariba Guard. That's the only 360 visor tag in the game, being able to look at all directions. It also has ECM Hacker -3, so it effectively has hacking mimetism. And it has that kind of similar combination on my favorite profile, where it has the multi-heavy machine gun and shock mine dispenser, and then it has a burst 2 heavy flamethrower instead of the shotgun, which is kind of give or take. Sometimes a flamethrower would be better, sometimes a shotgun would be better, but either way, it's 71 points, which is a fair discount, but having baggage means that, yeah, it can reload itself and anyone around it. And mine dispensers, if you are firing them with line of fire, you can use double shot, so you can fire
Mhm.
2 mines at a time and reload, and fire 2 mines at a time and reload. And if they're in your good range band, you're dropping these on 17s, which feels pretty good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Magariba Guard is a great area denial tool. Going into suppressive fire with 360 always feels good that you don't have to worry about somebody sneaking up on you in that way. But yeah, Margarita guards, really sweet.
And for my final favorite tag in this segment, because I do love all of them to a greater or lesser
Hmm.
degree,
Hmm.
but I'm a fan of the weird tags.
For sure.
Okay, so this one's another one that's very unique in how it operates, and it is the iguana from Corregidor.
Sure. Yeah.
And it it's size 7, so it looks like a main battle tag, but it's not because it's a light tag as far as armor. It's only armor 6 and BTS 6, so it has a little bit of a uphill battle when it comes to that. But it does have ECM hacker -3, so it does have a little bit of hacking defense, and you can again boost that up with fairy dust firewall, which is pretty awesome, and does all the other normal kind of tag stuff, except that there's two key pieces that make this the weird tag and why I love it. First is it carries a repeater. I don't think
Yep.
actually there's any other tag that carries a flat out repeater.
Not that I can think of offhand.
Yep. So this is your repeater network advancing. This is you moving this thing up and daring people to move by it, especially if you can kind of hide it behind a building. But it's resilient, and between the BTS 6, the ECM hacker, and potentially a firewall that you've put on it, it itself is fairly resistant to being hacked. So it can do a lot of work up in that area of just being an awesome deterrent and area denial if your opponent has anything that's hackable because they don't want to come near it. The second unique thing on this is that, like Maximus, this is also a 4-wound tag. Unlike Maximus, it takes 2 wounds before the escape system triggers.
Yep.
But instead of a 1-wound guy getting out, a 2-wound armor 3 BTS 3 heavy infantry gets out, and he takes the AP HMG with him. So,
Yeah. That's pretty
like,
nice.
his stats aren't great. He's only BS 12 at that point, but he keeps the tactical awareness order, which is awesome. He has a +1 burst AP heavy pistol and a +1 burst light flamethrower. So he basically just takes the weapons of the tag and just slots out the smaller version from the bullet extenders or whatever that they have on it, because it has a AP HMG and a +1 burst heavy flamethrower on the main version. He just gets out, and now you have a halfway decent 2-wound heavy infantry rolling around with an AP HMG and a light flamethrower.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, like I said, he can just kind of be a pain in the ass at that point, and I love it. It's a tag that is widely considered to be kind of garbage, because a lot of people see that it takes 2 structure and then you don't have the tag part anymore. But I think that
Right.
a lot of times people are overlooking the potential that it has due to having that repeater, having the hacking defense it does, and getting that heavy infantry instead of just losing the tag. So it's
Yeah.
unique for what it does, and it has a lot of potential, but it needs to be played in a very different way from most other tags.
Yeah, and the cool thing about having an onboard repeater is that it makes it a fair bit trickier to hack. It's not impossible to get around because if you are very careful with someone with a deployable repeater, or I suppose most deployable repeater carriers they don't tend to be hackable
Mhm.
themselves, but you can move somebody with a deployable repeater and put it in range, or you could fire a pitcher and drop a repeater in range that way. But otherwise, if you move a unit that's a repeater, like a remote, that's just going to get hacked. And if you get the
Mhm.
hacker in range, then they're definitely going to get hacked and then have to fight through firewalls if they want to return those programs. So yeah, you can get around that and still hack the iguana without enemy hackers intervening, but you have some hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
And a really hard time picking my last one, but I'm going to say that for purposes of diversity, Maximus was a Pano tag for my list because I'm going to go with the Marut.
uh, how are you going to pick anything else? It's you, Mr. Aleph.
I know. But yeah, the Marut is, like we kind of mentioned briefly before, this is a main battle tag as well. But some of the cool things about the Marut is that it's quite resilient to hacking because it has a willpower 15 that's pretty rare amongst most tags. It has BTS of 9, which is pretty uncommon. There are definitely a handful out there, but most tags are in the ballpark of 6 instead. And full ballistic skill of 15 and gets a multispectral visor level 2. And is one of the prettiest tags in the game. Like, it is probably my favorite size 7 sculpt in the game, which, you know, only helps my opinion on the tag. So the Marut is fairly expensive, but you're also getting, generally, you're getting a command unit because this will often be your lieutenant. And the Marut is a willpower 15 Strategos level 2 lieutenant. And that is pretty notable. And while it is 90 points and 2 SWC, that still gives you plenty of room to get support elements in Aleph. Like you have access to really good quality engineers, you have access to very powerful hackers. So you have a lot of good support around her as well, which is really nice. She's packing a multi HMG, a heavy flamethrower, and a pulsar, which is kind of neat that you can kind of pick the template that is most applicable. And I don't know why this edition she gained CC attack +1 burst with a CC of 18 and no skills, but I guess those extra arms had to do something.
Yep.
And it's an extra swing with the PS3 AP weapon.
Yeah, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Some of the tags getting that like PS3. Oh,
Yeah, it does hit hard. But yeah, like this is again kind of one of those artillery piece tags. Like this doesn't need to be up close, and the sword is for show. I don't know why that's there, but I'm pretty sure it's to keep her cost above a certain threshold. And that's
yeah.
the maturity of it. But yeah. Yeah, being able to not worry about mimetic pieces, being able to not worry about smoke or even benefit from smoke if you bring your own and take her in vanilla is really, really powerful. Because if you can take a tag that's already ignoring modifiers and effectively give her mimetism 6 on top of that, there's not much that's going to stand up to that sort of firepower. So, yeah, there we have it. Some of our favorite tags in Infinity. And with that said, I think we're about ready to transition to our final thoughts on tags. But I did want to quickly say thank you to our patrons who help keep the show going. We really appreciate your contributions. And if you're interested and able to join, you can find us on patreon.com/metachemistry. And we have some benefits in return to kind of show our thanks for you helping us out and covering things like subscription costs for software, hardware upgrades or replacements occasionally, and things like that. And so we'll offer things like final voting on polls, early access to episodes, some Patreon private rooms on our Discord server. And if it's not something that you're able to contribute to, you can also join as a free member, and you can keep up on all of our posts and things like that. And as far as our Discord itself goes, you can find our Discord link in the show notes, as always. And we'd love to have you there on our community where you can chat with us or talk about your favorite tags or how much you dislike tags. If there are those of you out there, I don't know if you people exist, but maybe there are some of you. But yeah, we'd love to have you. So please feel free to join us if you're looking for another place to talk Infinity. we'd love to see you there. And so, with that said, Ian, final thoughts on the fundamentals of tags.
Tags are awesome. I love them.
Hmm.
They're that like centerpiece model for any faction, and they deserve the support and love that goes with that. And
That's
by
right.
that I mean paint your tag and give him plenty
That's
of
it.
engineers and hackers and stuff to make sure he doesn't go down easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a really important lesson to remember. It's easy to look at a tag and see a really good to phenomenal stat line and just kind of feel like it can fight the world and kind of punch through anything. And, sometimes that will happen. Maybe, there's a string of good face to faces or poor saves or an opponent who's not prepared or things like that where they can just go on a rampage and take a game over by themselves. But generally speaking, all things being equal, they need support. They can't do everything themselves, even though they can do a lot. And, all basically every tag having access to a specialist is really helpful, but it can die. And it's typically not very good willpower. But yeah, having those other pieces to support it and know that even the toughest units in the game are not going to be able to get through everything unscathed is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you mind your positioning, get an engineer, watch out for those hackers, and have a good time stomping around with some robots.
Yeah.
So, thanks for listening. If you want to tell us about your tag stories or your favorite tags, feel free to drop by and let us know either in the comments or on our Discord. But on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin.
And Ian, and that's the meta.